very, very well. So I hope to kind of build on them next year. Apart from that, like, I'm on a year out at the moment, so when if I am elected, I will like be able to get straight into this. You know what I mean? I won't have to wait to do exams. They're starting June, so I can start making plans for next year in March, which I see as a big advantage over the other candidates.
Okay, and Paul, why do you want to be the Ents officer of UCDSU?
Well, I've been working with bands for quite some time, and I'd like to add a bit of initiative and a bit of originality to the Ents office in the city. I think it's become a little bit stale in the past year. I think some new ideas can be brought in, and some big changes can be made over the next 12 months for those elected.
Okay, well, two of you, Laura and Paul, have mentioned the Ents office has become a bit stale over the past year and looking for changes. I suppose, Stephen, you've been involved in Ents for the last couple of years under Anto and Holly. How would you respond to that? Do you think Ents is stale? Will you bring in changes, or do you think it's going well?
I don't know if stale is the word I'd use. It didn't do as well this year. The reason kind of being that Holly was an experienced candidate going into the election. Like, and I'm good friends with Holly, and I'd say it to Holly's face as well, and she'd admit that as well. The problem with the job is sometimes that candidates can go into it with very, very little experience, and it takes really about 6 months to kind of learn the ropes. You know what I mean? Like, if Holly was starting off now, she probably would have done as good a job as Anto had done. Do you know what I mean? So that's probably why you could say it had gone a bit stale. But like, on the other side of things, I think there has been a bit more diversity brought into Ents this year. Like, we've had some very good electro gigs. We've had Justice and Errol Alkin in that have gone really, really well, and it's never been done before to have that level of musical diversity. We've also had a few good hip hop acts and stuff in, like we saw Goldie Looking Jane playing in the bar this year. So I don't think stale is the word I'd use really. Like, it was just kind of it probably wasn't as well run as it should have been this year. Do you know what I mean? Just probably because of the experience level of the candidate in question. But I think if it's done right next year and we can build on what's done next year, I think it will be very, very good.
Okay, and Laura, you mentioned bringing it more mainstream. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that, to be honest, that there was just a lot. You mentioned the electro gigs, which did go really well, and that is perfectly fine type of music, but I think it was totally monopolised by that kind of music. And what I'm kind of saying,
gigs.
well, there was 3 really. Sugar Daddy is not really electro, I suppose, but what I'm saying is that I don't think that was all, and it was a lot of to do with B&L and Ents all the time, and I think a lot of other different societies and different genres should get a shot at having the budget spent on a big gig for them, or not even a more small gig as well for them. And I basically think that it doesn't really matter what my personal tastes in music are. That's not what the job in question is. It's to provide affordable entertainment for everyone. So,
just one point there on the Ents budget. The Ents budget wasn't spent on B&L. B&L co-promoted those gigs and paid for those acts. Okay, that's just what it sounded like.
And Paul, what would you do to breathe new life into Ents?
I'm not going to unveil all my big secrets a couple of days before the elections, but I'd like to keep it as diverse as possible. I don't think focusing on one particular genre of music is in any way good for anyone. In university, there's 25,000 students, and everyone's got a different taste. I think the more diversity is, the better. Kind of cater for everyone as much as possible.
Okay. Now, of course, you've mentioned the Ents budget. It is an awful lot of students' money that you're dealing with, perhaps more so than any other sabbatical position. You're in a position to break even, make a small profit, or unfortunately to make massive losses. Can any of you tell me, do you have experience dealing with this kind of money or like organisation skills in that genre? We'll start with Paul.
Sorry, could you repeat the question there, please?
Dealing with an awful lot of students' money as Ents officer, what experience do you have that would give the electorate confidence in your ability to handle that kind of money and avoid making massive losses?
Well, as I've said, I've been working with a couple of bands for the past few years, and one in particular, they're recording their second performance on TV tomorrow on Sunday night, and we've had to
with every single timetable to know when people, like the UCD ball, a lot of people didn't go, I assume because exams were so close, the price was too high, that kind of thing. So you have to have your ear to the ground at all times and know when people are actually going to be able to go to the ball on campus, and when there's no point in putting on a huge event if people aren't going to come to it.
Okay. Paul, freshest ball on campus or off campus?
Like Stephen, I think my ideas have to be kept close to my heart. I think it all really depends. on what way you want to leave it or spread out the budget during the year.
And what way do you want to spread out the budget?
Well, I suppose I'd like to see a consistent number of good gigs throughout the year. I think it's important to have one or two big blowouts, but I think you can't just leave everyone waiting on a limb until one final night out at the end of the year. I think it has to be kept constant throughout. Otherwise, people are just kind of sitting in limbo waiting for something to happen.
Okay. Well, speaking of keeping things constant throughout, Laura in particular seemed critical of the focus towards dance music this year. I have to say, props to Holly. Justice is the best night out I've had in UCD since I came here.
Absolutely, that was a great night out.
But I'm just one person, and that's my personal taste. So, how do you all think you can balance varying tastes throughout the campus, music-wise?
Well, I think the key is, especially since every faculty is different now and every timetable is different, that to have a lot of smaller scale gigs I think would work better and to be much more consistent so that everybody, because I know so many people, even when I was getting my nomination form signed, people had no idea the Ents office was even there, which didn't really happen last year. There was a lot more presence. So I think to have smaller scale gigs so everyone has something to go to, and then the things that are, a huge amount of budget is being spent on and that are for everyone on campus, for those things to be, and the big late night bars and late nights in the bar to be slightly more mainstream so that everybody can come, because I know a lot of people that find dance music quite offensive even. I like it particularly, but that's true, yeah, I know, but to have a bit of diversity, there was 3 kind of quite similar late nights in the bar 3 Wednesdays and consecutively, and it was obvious that by the 3rd one people just had enough because it was, nobody came.
What 3 were they?
Which one was this?
This was Justice, and then Errol Alkin, and then by the time Sugar Daddy and Group Armada were there.
They weren't consecutive.
Well, they were pretty much.
Well, I mean, to be
the
fair,
16th of
was
November.
before the break, and Errol Alkin was
Okay,
after
well,
the break.
There was 2 then. Justice was a great night out, but I just saw them kind of getting less and less interest.
Well, I mean, there could be.
Had you heard of Errol Alkin?
I hadn't, but I heard he was fantastic, and I was very disappointed that I couldn't afford to go.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're not here essentially to talk about Holly's work. But Stephen, how will you balance varying tastes throughout the campus and deliver to everyone?
Right, the first thing I'd say is, Laura mentioned running smaller gigs, okay? The problem with doing that is, if you're running smaller gigs for niche tastes, what's going to happen is you're only going to get about 200 people going to them, right? Which means you can probably only charge about €10 for most of these gigs, which means you've about $2,000 to play with. In terms of getting acts, right, and expenses, you're not going to get any good acts for that, right? The way I would like to balance musical diversity is by having big kind of festival style gigs on campus for a start, and also in big live music venues, places like Tripod and also the Crawdaddy complex. If you do it that way, it means you can have 3 or 4 different musical genres at any one time. It's kind of like the way they'll do it at the Trinity Ball this year, for example. There'll be a dance tent, there'll be a stage for Irish talent, there'll be a stage for big international talent, right? I think the best way to bring musical diversity is to have big live music events. So you can have a little hip hop stage, you can have your electro arena, you can have your live music stage, so you can easily cater for the taste of all the students in UCD in one big night. I think that's the best way to do it. It's also going to allow you to sell a lot more tickets than any small event would. Like the UCD Ball, I reckon if done properly could sell 4,000 tickets, right, at about €50 a head. If you're generating that amount of ticket revenue, you're going to be able to get much bigger and better acts.